January 12, 1995, Knoxville, Tennessee. It was a cold Thursday night when 4 students walked away from the Jobs Corps Center. To anyone watching, they looked like friends heading out for the evening. No one knew one of them would never return. Hours later, investigators would discover one of the most disturbing crime scenes Tennessee had ever seen. The victim had been beaten, slashed, and tortured for nearly an hour before dying. The brutality stunned even veteran detectives. But perhaps the most shocking discovery came after police learned what one of the killers had taken from the scene. A piece of the victim's skull. The person responsible wasn't a seasoned criminal. She wasn't even old enough to legally buy alcohol. She was just 18 years old. Before we continue, I want to take a quick moment to thank all of you for watching. If you appreciate fact-based true crime documentaries and love crime all the time media, take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel and comment down below. Your support helps these stories reach more people and ensures cases like these are never forgotten. Now, let's get back to the case. Her name was Christa Pike. And nearby 3 decades later, her case remains one of the most notorious murders in American history. Before she became known around the world as Tennessee's only woman on death row. Christa Pike was simply another teenager looking for direction. Born on March 10, 1976, in Beckley, West Virginia, Pike experienced a childhood her attorneys would later describe as marked by instability, abuse, neglect, and untreated mental illness. Those details would become part of her appeals years later, though they could never erase what happened in January 1995. Hundreds of miles away, another young woman was trying to build a future. Her name was Colleen Slemmer. 19 years old. A student at the Job Corps Center in Knoxville. Like many students there, she hoped the federally funded vocational program would help her gain job skills and create a better life. Neither young woman could have imagined their lives would become forever linked by one horrific night. The Job Corps program was created to give young adults education, vocational training, and a second chance. Students lived in dormitories, attended classes, made friends, and planned for careers. For many, it was an opportunity to leave difficult circumstances behind. But inside the Knoxville campus, tensions had begun to grow. Among a small group of students, jealousy, rumors, and unhealthy relationships were quickly building toward violence. At Job Corps, Christa Pike began dating Tatterell Shipp, another student. Friends described the relationship as intense. The couple spent nearly all of their free time together. According to prosecutors, Pike soon became convinced that fellow student Colleen Slemmer was interested in Shipp. Whether that belief had any basis in reality remains disputed. Friends of Colleen reportedly denied that she was trying to pursue Shipp. But prosecutors argued that Pike's jealousy continued to grow until she began talking openly about killing Colleen. On January 11, 1995, the day before the murder, another Job Corps student, Kim Iloilo, later testified that Christa Pike made a chilling statement. According to court records, Pike said she intended to kill Colleen Slemmer because she had just felt mean that day. At the time, it sounded unbelievable. Teenagers say shocking things, arguments happen, and threats are made. No one imagined those words would become evidence in a capital murder trial. 4 students signed out of the dormitory, only 3 would return. On the evening of January 12, 1995, students at the Job Corps Center settled into what seemed like an ordinary Thursday. Inside the dorms, conversations drifted between classes, weekend plans, and relationships. No one realized that before the night was over, one of their classmates would be dead. According to testimony presented in court, Christa Pike, Tatterell Shipp, and Shadala Peterson persuaded Colleen Slemmer to leave the campus with them. Prosecutors argued that Pike had already decided Colleen needed to die. The motive, they said, centered on jealousy and Pike's belief that Colleen had shown interest in Tatterell Shipp. The 4 young people walked away from the Job Corps campus toward an isolated wooded area near the University of Tennessee's agricultural property. It was dark, cold, and far enough away that no one could hear what would happen next. What happened in those woods would later be reconstructed through physical evidence, witness testimony, and statements introduced at trial. Prosecutors said Christa Pike confronted Colleen before the violence erupted. The attack was prolonged and extraordinarily brutal. According to the medical evidence, Colleen was beaten, stabbed, and repeatedly assaulted over an extended period. Investigators testified that the injuries showed the attack was not instantaneous but involved multiple forms of violence before she ultimately died. The details of the assault were so graphic that many news reports and court opinions have summarized them rather than describing every injury. For investigators, one fact stood out immediately. This wasn't a fight that spiraled out of control. The prosecution argued it was an intentional killing. After Colleen was dead, prosecutors alleged that Christa Pike removed a small portion of the victim's skull and kept it as a trophy. It was one of the most disturbing allegations in the case. Investigators later recovered the fragment after witnesses reported Pike had shown it to other students and claimed it belonged to the victim. That evidence became a powerful part of the prosecution's case at trial. The next morning, the wooded area appeared quiet once again. Students headed to class. Faculty began another workday. Then came a discovery no one expected. Colleen Slemmer's body was found in the woods. Knoxville police immediately secured the scene, and detectives quickly realized they were investigating a homicide of exceptional brutality. The victim was identified as a Job Corps student, narrowing the investigation to people who knew her. Police began interviewing classmates. At first, many described routine campus life. But before long, detectives began hearing the same name over and over again. Several students told investigators Pike had made disturbing comments before and after the murder, including statements interpreted as admissions of what had happened. Those interviews rapidly shifted the investigation toward Pike and the people who had been with her that night. Within days, investigators believed they had solved the murder. But what Christa Pike allegedly told police and what witnesses would later reveal in court would make this case one of the most infamous murder trials in Tennessee history. By sunrise on Friday, January 13, 1995, the investigation was already underway. An employee with the University of Tennessee Grounds Department made a horrifying discovery near the university's agricultural campus. At first glance, he thought he had found the remains of a dead animal. As he got closer, he realized it was the body of a young woman. He immediately called police. Detectives from the Knoxville Police Department and University of Tennessee Police quickly secured the area. What they found told the story of an extraordinarily violent attack. The victim was identified as 19-year-old Colleen Slemmer, a Job Corps student. The medical examiner documented numerous blunt force injuries, stab and slash wounds, and defensive injuries, indicating Colleen had fought for her life. The cause of death was determined to be severe blunt force trauma to the head. Investigators knew almost immediately that this was not a random killing. The person or people responsible likely knew the victim. Back at the Job Corps Center, detectives began interviewing students. One name came up almost immediately. Kimberly Iloilo told investigators something that changed the course of the case. She said that the day before the murder, Christa Pike had told her she intended to kill Colleen because she had just felt mean that day. Kimberly also reported seeing Christa, Colleen, Tatterell Shipp, and Shadala Peterson leave the Job Corps Center together on the evening of January 12. Then Kimberly shared an even more disturbing detail. Later that night, she said Christa came into her room and claimed she had just killed Colleen. According to Kimberly's testimony, Christa showed her what she said was a fragment of Colleen's skull, wrapped in a napkin, and described details of the attack. Kimberly wasn't the only student to come forward. Another Job Corps student, Stephanie Lee Wilson, also told investigators that Christa confessed to the killing and showed her a piece of bone she claimed came from Colleen's skull. Wilson testified that Christa described slashing Colleen's throat, beating her, and taking the bone fragment as a souvenir. For detectives, these independent witness statements were impossible to ignore. On January 17, 1995, just 2 days after the murder, investigators arrested Christa Pike. They also took Tatterall Shipp into custody. They asked them to see the damaged teenager behind it. But prosecutors argued that no amount of childhood trauma could justify what had happened to Colleen Slemmer. After hearing days of testimony, the jury deliberated.
Ordered that you shall be put to death by electrocution in the mode prescribed by law, and that you shall be transferred to the custody of the warden at the Tennessee Prison for Women. And further, on the 12th day of January, 1997, your body shall be subjected to shock by a sufficient current of electricity. May God have mercy upon you. Mr. Bates, take Mrs. Pike into the door.
Can I please have my mom before I go?
Mr. Bates, please hold Miss Pike in the dock.
Please, let me just love my mom.
Please hold Miss Pike in the dock.
I love you. I love you too. I love you too.
When they returned to the courtroom, the decision was unanimous. Guilty. Christa Pike was convicted of first-degree premeditated murder. She was also convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. For Colleen Slemmer's family, the verdict brought accountability. But one more phase remained. The sentencing hearing. During the penalty phase, jurors weighed aggravating and mitigating evidence. The prosecution argued the murder was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, emphasizing the prolonged nature of the attack. The defense again urged mercy, pointing to Pike's youth and traumatic upbringing. After deliberating, the jury reached its decision. On March 30, 1996, Christa Gale Pike was sentenced to death by electrocution, making her the youngest woman ever sentenced to death in Tennessee. Her boyfriend, Tatterall Shipp, was also convicted and received a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Shadala Peterson, who cooperated with the investigators and testified for the prosecution, received a substantially lesser sentence after pleading guilty to a reduced charge. For many, the case was over. But for Christa Pike, the next chapter would be just as shocking, because while awaiting execution on Tennessee's death row, she would once again be accused of extreme violence. On March 30, 1996, Christa Gale Pike entered Tennessee's death row. She was just 20 years old. Her sentence made history. She became the youngest woman ever sentenced to death in Tennessee. While her attorneys prepared appeals, Pike settled into a life behind bars, a process that, in death penalty cases, often takes decades. Many assumed the violence that ended Colleen Slemmer's life over. They were wrong. 5 years after Colleen's murder, Christa Pike was once again accused of a brutal assault. On August 24, 2001, inside Tennessee Prison for Women, Pike attacked fellow inmate Patricia Jones. According to court records, Pike and another inmate, Natasha Cornett, lured Jones into Pike's cell under false pretenses. Once inside, prosecutors said the two women launched a violent attack. Jones suffered serious injuries before correctional officers intervened. She survived the attack. Authorities later said the attack appeared to have been planned, and Pike was charged with attempted first-degree murder. The case raised renewed concerns about her behavior while incarcerated. In 2004, Pike stood trial again. This time, she wasn't being tried for a murder in the woods. She was being tried for what happened inside prison walls. The jury found her guilty of attempted first-degree murder. She received a 25-year prison sentence, to be served in addition to her existing death sentence. For many observers, the conviction reinforced the prosecution's argument from the original case, that the violence in 1995 had not been an isolated act. As the years passed, Christa Pike's legal team filed appeal after appeal. They argued that her traumatic childhood had not been fully considered. Her mental health evidence should have carried greater weight, and errors during trial required a new sentencing hearing. State and federal courts reviewed those claims over many years. Again and again, Pike's conviction and death sentence were upheld. Death penalty cases often take decades because of the extensive appeals process designed to review constitutional claims. For Colleen Slemmer's family, each appeal reopened painful memories. For Pike, each denial brought her one step closer to execution. In 2025, the Tennessee Supreme Court scheduled Christa Pike's execution for September 30, 2026. If carried out, she would become the first woman executed in Tennessee since 1819, and the first execution of a woman under the state's modern death penalty system. As of today, Christa Pike remains on Tennessee's death row while those legal proceedings continue. It's easy, in notorious cases, for public attention to focus on the person who committed the crime. But at the center of this story is Colleen Slemmer. She was 19 years old. She enrolled in Job Corps hoping to build a future. She had family, friends, and dreams that were never realized. Her life ended in a secluded patch of woods because of a crime the courts found to be deliberate and extraordinarily cruel. For those who loved her, no sentence could restore what was taken. Nearly 3 decades have passed since that January night in Knoxville. The case of Christa Gale Pike remains one of Tennessee's most infamous murder cases, not only because of the brutality of the crime, but because it forced difficult questions about youth, violence, mental illness, and accountability.